My name is Lauren Ashford. To the outside world, I'm a 42-year-old stay-at-home wife living in a cozy suburb just outside Minneapolis. My neighbors think I spend my days rearranging throw pillows and baking banana bread. But behind that harmless image, I run an empire. I'm the CEO of Clarion Med, one of the fastest-growing medical equipment suppliers in the Midwest. My company generates millions in annual revenue, and I quietly pull in a six-figure salary, $145,000 a year. No one suspects a thing, especially not my husband Noah. We met when I was 30. He was magnetic, then warm, always noticing the smallest things, like how I added cinnamon to my coffee, or the way I double-knotted my shoelaces. That version of him made me believe in lasting love. Within a year, we were married. For a while, it was good. He was a man who loved slow mornings jazz records and grilled cheese with tomato soup. But somewhere between job changes and quiet dinners, the man I married began to vanish. Noah hated ambition, especially mine, even the version of it I never spoke aloud. When he struggled to keep steady work, I offered him a role at Clarion Med, an entry-level administrative position with full benefits, and triple the salary he was used to. He didn't even let me finish. "I'm not some charity case, Lauren," he snapped. "I don't need you pulling strings for me." I dropped it, swallowed the insult, and moved on. Each month, I quietly transferred $1,400 into his checking account. To help with the groceries, I said, when he asked never mind that he spent it on basketball shoes and online poker. I told myself it wasn't about the money, it was about dignity. But with every passing month, I watched mine shrink. Noah never asked how my day went. He never noticed the jet lag in my eyes after red-eye flights, or the tension in my shoulders from back-to-back Zoom calls with overseas clients. To him, I was just a bored wife with a flexible schedule and no real responsibilities. His disdain showed in the smallest ways. One evening, I was still on a conference call when he burst into the kitchen holding up a wrinkled shirt. "Seriously, you can't even iron anymore." I didn't answer. What could I say? That I'd just signed a 7-figure deal while he argued with internet trolls in his man cave. I stopped expecting kindness or partnership. The distance between us grew quiet, but loud. He got annoyed if my mother visited, called her an intruder, said he needed peace, and didn't like strangers in his house. I stood there ashamed not for him, but of the woman I'd become. Quiet, accommodating, smaller. But I kept going, because people like me, women who are told they're too much, learn early how to shrink themselves for love. I became a master of managing chaos on spreadsheets and in my marriage, until the day I collapsed. It was a Tuesday. I was walking out of a product planning meeting when everything spun. The fluorescent lights blurred into halos, my knees buckled, and then darkness. I woke up 2 hours later in the ER. Tubes, beeping monitors, a doctor explaining something about concerning blood results and immediate follow-up tests. I nodded like I understood, like I wasn't scared. But 2 days later, the results came back. Pancreatic tumor. Early stage, but aggressive. Treatment needed to begin right away. I lay in that white hospital bed alone, staring at the ceiling. I texted Noah. I called. No answer. For 48 hours, not a single message. No flowers. No visit. Nothing. And that's when I knew. The perfect lie I'd been living wasn't just that I was a housewife. It was that I was loved. I reached for the nurse call button and whispered, "Can I get a phone?" Not to call my husband, but to call my CFO. Because if Noah wanted to discard me in my weakest moment, he was about to learn what strength really looked like. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and faint lemon, the curtains drawn just enough to let in the dull light of a cloudy afternoon. My skin was pale, paper-like, and the IV in my arm pulsed, a quiet reminder of the battle I hadn't chosen, but was now fighting. My hair had started to thin, and the inside of my mouth always tasted faintly of metal. The nurses were kind. The oncologist was efficient, but no one could disguise what was happening to me. I was in the middle of a war, and I was fighting it alone. Noah still hadn't shown up. I hadn't heard a word since my text 2 days ago. I'm in the hospital. I need to talk. No reply, no missed calls, no check-in. Until Thursday. I was dozing off when I heard the door click. My eyes fluttered open, half expecting a nurse with more meds. Instead, Noah stood there, jacket-zipped hands in his pockets. Face unreadable. "You're here," I croaked. My voice was dry brittle from days of chemo and little sleep. He didn't move toward me. He walked straight to the side table, pulled a manila folder from under his coat, and placed it on the tray, next to my untouched lunch. "I've filed for divorce," he said, each word clipped, almost rehearsed. "The paperwork's in there. I think we can agree. The house and the car go to me. They're in my name anyway." I blinked. For a second, I thought maybe the drugs were messing with my hearing. He stood there, like he was finalizing a lease, not ending a decade of marriage. "Look," he continued, avoiding eye contact, "you've got things to deal with, and I can't put my life on hold, waiting to see how this all turns out." I stared at him, and something inside me, something that had long been worn thin, finally snapped clean. It wasn't the divorce. I had already accepted we were beyond saving. It was the way he looked at me, like I was a declining asset he needed to cut loose before it tanked his portfolio. I wasn't a woman he loved. I was a risk. "You came all the way here, just to hand me this?" I asked, voice steady, even as my heart slammed against my ribs. "It's better to be direct," he said with a shrug. "Dragging this out won't help either of us." For a long moment, I said nothing. I turned my head and looked out the window, watching 2 sparrows hop across the ledge. When I finally looked back at him, something in me had shifted. "Fine," I said. "Take what you think you need. Thank you for the clarity." He raised an eyebrow. Maybe he'd expected a breakdown, or maybe he thought I'd beg. But I didn't. I wouldn't. "You don't have a choice anyway," he muttered, backing toward the door. "Actually," I said softly, almost to myself, "you just gave me one." The door clicked behind him, and for a full minute I lay there in silence, the folder still unopened on the tray. Then I reached for the call button again. This time, not for a nurse, for the phone. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was the beginning of something else. A rise, a return, a reckoning. I dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Eric Jennings, my CFO, picked up on the second ring. "Lauren," he said, startled. "Are you okay?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I will be. I need you to come here and bring the files. It's time." He was silent for a beat. Then, "I'll be there in the morning." I leaned back against the pillows, the buzz of the chemo pump humming softly. Noah thought he'd walked out of this marriage with the upper hand. But he'd just walked into a storm he never saw coming. By the time Eric arrived the next morning, I was already dressed well as dressed as someone with a chemo port and a hospital wristband could be. I'd asked the nurse for privacy and propped myself up with extra pillows, a clipboard balanced on my lap. My hair was tied back in a makeshift bun, and my lips were cracked from the treatment, but my mind had never been clearer. Eric stepped into the room holding a leather briefcase. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much since our call, but his eyes carried a kind of quiet urgency. The moment he saw me, he closed the door behind him. I brought everything he said, nodding at the case. Contracts, ownership files, the trust documents. All of it. I took a slow breath. Thank you. I wasn't sure I'd be strong enough to do this, but that's not the woman I want to be anymore. Eric didn't sit. He pulled the small visitor chair closer to the bed and set the briefcase on the table beside me. His voice dropped to a whisper. You don't have to explain. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. He opened the case and laid out a neat row of documents. Ownership certificates, legal structures, back-end vendor agreements, all carefully labeled and filed. Every piece of the empire I'd built quietly under the radar. You were right to hide all this under a proxy, he said. Your mom's name kept your identity airtight. But now that Brandon's pulled this stunt, we can reassign public ownership back to you in under 2 days. I nodded slowly, absorbing it all. The deception I'd crafted to live quietly, never out of shame, but out of peace, had been my armor. I didn't want to flaunt my power, just protect it. I'd let Noah live in ignorance because I believed marriage meant something sacred. I was wrong. I want the termination letters sent on Monday. I said, my voice firm. Start with the Vital Tech account. Eric didn't flinch. That contract alone makes up over half their logistics revenue. You sure you want to pull it all at once? I didn't hesitate. Yes, let's start there. He made a note on his tablet. And what about the personal trust, the one tied to your properties? Strip his name off everything. The house, the second vehicle, even the joint account he never contributed to. We'll file a formal motion. My lawyer's name is Eliza Harper. I'll give you her contact. Eric gave a small, tight smile. It's about time. Honestly, Lauren, the way he treated you, the things you didn't even tell me, I knew something wasn't right. I glanced down at the IV running into my arm. The medication flowed steadily, a slow chemical fight. But what burned more wasn't the treatment. It was the years I'd let myself be minimized, dismissed, made to feel invisible. Noah thought he could walk away with my house, my car, and my silence, I said. But he forgot who he was married to. Eric paused, studying me. What changed I did, I replied simply, lying in this bed wondering if I'd even get to see another spring. Something inside me cracked open. This isn't just about him anymore. This is about me reclaiming my own name. We worked through the documents for 2 straight hours. Every signature felt like a piece of me returning. Eric handled the logistics like the trusted advisor he'd always been, quietly, efficiently, without needing to ask why now. He understood. As he zipped up the briefcase and stood to leave, he looked at me and said, "He's not ready for what's coming." I smiled. Not cold, not cruel, just resolute. That's the point. When he left, I rested my head back against the pillows, exhausted, but awake in a way I hadn't been in years. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the storm. Monday morning came crisp and gray, the kind of sky that hovered with quiet tension. I was still at the hospital, hooked to another round of chemo, but my mind wasn't on the drip. It was on the email Eric had just scheduled to send at precisely 8:00 a.m. Subject termination of contract. Immediate effect. From Lauren Ashford, CEO, Clarion Med, to Peterson R., CEO, Vital Tech Logistics. That email was a thunderclap. The Vital Tech contract, a multi-million-dollar distribution deal, was the crown jewel of their operations. It accounted for over 60% of their revenue last quarter. The logistics partnership was built on my silent trust that Noah, their liaison, had obliterated. Noah never knew he had bragged to me over our dinner table about securing a huge medical client, never realizing I was the one who'd signed the deal under a proxy name. That had been my grace, my protection. But now, grace was no longer owed. At 3:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a call from a number I knew by heart. Lauren said, a strained voice. "This is Robert Peterson from Vitaltech. We were quite surprised by the termination. If this is about renegotiation, we're willing to." "It's not about money," I interrupted. "I've been made aware of certain employee behavior that violates our code of ethics." "I see. May I ask which employee, Noah Whitaker?" I said evenly. A pause. A long one. "Would you be willing to discuss this further?" he asked carefully. "No need. The decision is final." I hung up before he could say more. My hands were steady, my heart calm. Back in my hospital room, I stared at the muted television on the wall. A news ticker rolled across the bottom, but I wasn't really watching. I was waiting. And just like that, by 5:45 p.m., Eric confirmed it. Noah had been let go. Immediate termination. They had reviewed internal HR concerns, and the loss of the Clarion Med contract sealed it. That evening, I received a panicked call from Noah. I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded everything to Eliza Harper, my attorney. Eliza didn't waste time. By Tuesday morning, she filed a counter-divorce petition. This one was lean, merciless, and surgical. Eviction notice 30 days to vacate the property. House deed transfer proof that I'd paid the full mortgage from my personal income. Asset protection, full removal of Noah from all joint accounts. Financial disclosures, proof of monthly transfers I had made to support him. Civil damage clause request for preemptive breach terms, should he contest unfairly. Eliza's voice over the phone was brisk, but impressed. "This is airtight, Lauren. He's in for a shock. He should have left quietly," I said, staring out the hospital window. "But he came for war, so now he'll get it." A courier delivered the countersuit to Noah's workplace just hours before he was fired. It was poetic in the way storms sometimes are. Later that night, my nurse Michelle adjusted my IV and gave me a soft smile. "Rough day," I smiled back faintly. "No, today was the first good day in a long time, because today I didn't cry. Today, I reminded the world and myself who I was. Lauren Ashford, CEO, fighter, woman who refuses to be erased. And if Noah thought the worst was over, he hadn't seen what happens when a woman stops protecting a man who never deserved her in the first place. Noah stumbled into the house just after 9 that night. I had been discharged from the hospital earlier that afternoon. Weak, yes, but stable. I sat on the living room sofa in a soft gray sweater, the fireplace flickering low behind me. A cup of untouched tea rested on the table beside a thick envelope. He looked wrecked. Shirt-wrinkled tie, loosened face pale with disbelief. He dropped his keys in the dish by the door, but didn't look at me. "Not yet. I got laid off today," he muttered like I hadn't already known. His voice didn't carry its usual swagger. It was shaky, confused, like someone waking from a long, arrogant dream. I didn't say anything. I let the silence grow thick between us. He finally turned to me. "Lauren, something's going on. That contract, the Clarion Med account, it vanished. Just like that. My boss said it came from the top, from the CEO. Still, I said nothing. I leaned forward, picked up the envelope, and placed it carefully on the coffee table. "You might want to open that," I said softly. He hesitated, then tore into it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. The air changed as recognition hit. The documents were official. My full ownership of Clarion Med. My executive signature on the termination notice. A breakdown of every monthly transfer I'd made to his account over the past 5 years. Every single receipt. He looked up, stunned. "What is this?" "That's your wake-up call," I replied. "I'm the CEO of Clarion Med, the company you thought you'd closed with your so-called pitch, the one you bragged about to your friends and posted about on LinkedIn." His jaw slackened. You're lying. You couldn't be." "I'm not lying, Noah. You just never bothered to look closely. I kept my role hidden. Signed everything through a proxy, my mother's name, remember her? You once called her just another nosy visitor." He sank into the nearest chair, like the weight of the truth had finally collapsed his posture. You lied to me." I tilted my head, my voice low but precise. "No, I protected myself. You dismissed me as a housewife with too much time on her hands, and I let you, because it was easier than trying to explain why the woman you slept beside was running a company while you were too proud to take a desk job." He looked at me now like I was a stranger, and maybe I was to him. But I wasn't a stranger to myself anymore. "You never once asked how I paid for the car," I continued, "or the credit card bills you racked up on gaming subscriptions and takeout. You thought your name on the house made it yours. I paid every cent. And now it's time you leave." He rubbed his forehead, trying to catch up. "Lauren, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said, "because you didn't care to." I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street, where we used to take late-night walks, back when things were simpler, when I still believed he saw me. "You took my silence as weakness," I said, still facing the window. "But all it did was give me space to build something you never deserved to be a part of." He rose, voice cracking. "What do you want from me?" I turned to him, steady and calm. "Nothing. I don't want anything from you, Noah. I just want you gone." As he stood there struggling for words, I saw what he really was, small, not just in ambition, but in heart. And me, I was done dimming my light for someone afraid of his own shadow. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. I was lying in bed at my new apartment, just a temporary place, while the real estate team finalized my lakeside home. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the bedside air purifier. I glanced at the screen. "Noah." I let it ring twice, then picked up. "Lauren." His voice was raspy, frantic. Please, just let me talk." I didn't speak, just put him on speaker, laid the phone on the nightstand, and leaned back, arms folded, staring at the ceiling. I was wrong. I was stupid. I thought I don't know what I thought. That you didn't care. That you were just there. A housewife with no ambition. I didn't know you were the one keeping everything together. I listened. Calm. Silent. Let him ramble. "I've lost everything," he continued. "They fired me. The house is being foreclosed. The credit cards, they're frozen. No one else will hire me after the termination report. You don't know what it's like to have everything fall apart overnight." I raised an eyebrow, thinking, "No, Noah. You don't know what it's like." "I do, because I lived it alone, in a hospital bed while you disappeared. I need another chance," he said, his voice breaking. "You and me, we had good times. Remember the lake trip, the fire pit, and the bottle of wine? We laughed. We were happy once." Now he was clinging to nostalgia like a lifeline. like it could undo years of dismissal, entitlement, and cruelty. I finally spoke quiet and even. "Noah, do you remember the name Alyssa?" The silence on the other end was immediate, like he'd stopped breathing. I let the question hang. "Then, how do you—" "You really should have been more careful with your texts," I said. "Or maybe don't use the work Wi-Fi to book hotel rooms with interns. Alyssa Morgan, 24 years old, daughter of the Chicago branch director." That ring any bells, I could hear him shifting, stammering. It wasn't like that. It wasn't serious. "You're right," I said coolly. "It was worse than serious. It was pathetic." He began sputtering apologies, but I had already tuned out. The part of me that used to ache hearing his voice that part was gone. All that remained was clarity. "You were sleeping with a girl young enough to be your niece, while I was hooked to an IV fighting for my life. Do you know what that feels like?" "No." "Lauren, please listen. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. A mistake," I repeated, almost laughing. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. You had an affair. You left me to die alone while you played boss at work, soaking in praise you didn't earn, and warmth you didn't deserve." He didn't respond. I filed for a no-contact clause, I added. "Any attempt to reach me going forward will go straight to my lawyer. And I've filed a civil suit for emotional damages. Infidelity is admissible in Minnesota. And trust me, I've got the receipts." He finally whispered, "You're really going through with this." I already did. I hung up, not with tears, not with hesitation, just with finality. Then I opened my contacts, tapped on his name, and hit block. This wasn't revenge. This was preservation. He had shattered the life I once built for two. Now I was building something new, just for me. And Alyssa, I didn't think about her again, because she was just a footnote in a story where I had reclaimed the pen. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. The following morning, my attorney, Eliza Harper, arrived at my hospital suite with a thick file in hand and a look that meant business. "Morning, Lauren," she said, placing the binder on the table beside my bed. "You ready to shake some pillars?" I nodded quietly. Eliza opened the file and laid out a stack of printed screenshots, email exchanges, hotel confirmations, and even security footage stills. Every last digital breadcrumb Noah had left behind, with Alyssa Morgan. "He made it easy," she added. "He was reckless. The evidence was indisputable. Time-stamped texts, flirtatious messages on his work email, and private photos taken in the Vitaltech office. Most damning was the metadata pinning his exact location at a luxury hotel. During the same nights he told me he was working late. Not only is this grounds for emotional damages, Eliza said, but in Minnesota, proof of infidelity can seriously tilt asset division in divorce proceedings, especially with your financial contributions on record. She handed me a pen. I signed the civil suit paperwork that morning. Emotional distress breach of marital duty, defamation of character by implication. Eliza knew how to hit every angle. Now we wait for the court date, she said. But I've also issued a formal demand for $85,000 in damages. Based on his financial standing, he'll push back. But with this evidence, the judge won't be on his side. I didn't need the money. I needed the dignity. And now every piece of it was in writing. Meanwhile, the storm outside my hospital walls was already brewing. Alyssa Morgan's social media vanished overnight. Her LinkedIn went dark. Her Instagram wiped clean. It wasn't long before word got back to Eliza. Alyssa's parents had quietly pulled her back to their family's property in rural Iowa, after Vitaltech's internal investigation confirmed the affair. It was less about justice and more about damage control. Her father, the Chicago branch director, negotiated a private settlement enough to prevent the scandal from escalating into public litigation. They wanted her name scrubbed clean. And truthfully, I didn't care. Alyssa wasn't my target. She was a symptom. Noah was the disease. As for him, the fallout came fast. Vitaltech blacklisted him formally and socially. His HR file now included ethical violations. That red flag circulated quickly through every logistics firm and contracting agency in the tri-state area. No one wanted to touch him. I heard from Eric a few days later. Noah had tried to get a position through a shared vendor. The recruiter took one look at his termination record and passed. Soon, he was evicted from our shared house after failing to respond to the 30-day vacate notice. My legal team had ensured the deed was pulled from under his name. He tried staying with friends, but the couch crashing wore out quickly. Eventually, he settled into a rundown apartment in Brooklyn Park, paid for with credit cards he could no longer afford. With no job and mounting debt, the collectors circled fast. Calls rang morning, noon, and night. His inbox filled with final notices, bounced checks, and payment demands. The financial cushion I'd once padded around him was gone, and he had no clue how to live without it. Meanwhile, I rested. I focused on healing, on rebuilding my immune system, regaining my strength, and managing the side effects of treatment. My days were quiet, peaceful, the way life should be when you're no longer under the weight of someone else's denial. Noah had built his identity on the illusion of control. I dismantled it piece by piece, with truth evidence, and the kind of resolve that can only come from walking through fire and deciding you're never burning for someone else again. He had underestimated me, and now the world wouldn't let him forget it. The day I heard the words, "You're in complete remission," I didn't cry. I just sat there, in the cold, sterile doctor's office, staring at the test results, with a smile that felt like it had been waiting years to surface. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear this time, but from release. It was over. The cancer, the courtroom battles, the heartbreak, all of it. I was free. After 2 months of at-home recovery, I returned to Clarion Med, but not as the woman who once played small for comfort. I walked into the main conference room that morning, wearing a tailored navy blazer and a quiet confidence that turned heads. Eric was already waiting, standing at the end of the long mahogany table. When I entered, the entire team stood and clapped, not because I asked them to, but because they had seen what I survived. Eric handed me a mug that read, "Welcome back, boss." I chuckled, shaking my head the moment unexpectedly emotional. But I didn't return to rebuild the same life. I came back to design a new one. I signed off on a promotion for Eric, handing him the COO role I had held close for too long. I no longer needed to manage every cog in the machine. I needed to breathe, to live. Weeks later, I moved into a small house by the lake in Duluth. Nothing grand, just enough wide windows that caught the sunrise pine trees that rustled with the breeze, and silence, beautiful, unbroken silence. My mornings began with tea on the porch, the steam curling upward like a prayer. My nights ended with a book in hand, and my feet tucked under a wool blanket, no longer worrying whether the TV remote was in the right spot or whether my presence was too much. Noah didn't cross my mind often anymore, but occasionally I'd hear whispers. He had sold the car, the last piece of his identity he'd clung to, used the cash to chip away at credit card debt, moved into a small rental near the industrial district. Word was, He landed a night shift position at a packaging center, grueling, thankless work. He lasted 2 weeks before missing shifts. No one picked up his calls now. The name Noah Whitaker had become a quiet, cautionary tale in our business circles. A man who burned every bridge without knowing who built them. There were messages, of course. Emails. Anonymous roses sent to the office. One time he even showed up at Clarion Med's front desk, only to be turned away by security, just as I'd instructed. The woman I once was might have felt a twinge of guilt. But the woman I am now, she sleeps peacefully. Romance came knocking again. A few polite invitations, coffee dinner, a concert. Some were from colleagues, others from old friends who'd quietly admired from afar. I turned them all down, not out of bitterness, but because for the first time, I was completely whole on my own. I wasn't closed off. I was simply content. Love, if it came again, would have to add peace, not challenge it. One autumn evening, Eric stopped by for tea. We sat on the porch, wrapped in flannel throws, watching the lake shimmer gold beneath the setting sun. "Ever think about getting married again?" he asked, half teasing. I smiled gently. Maybe, but not now. Right now, I like the sound of my own quiet. He nodded. "You've earned it." The wind rustled through the trees, soft and steady, like the rhythm of a heart that finally knows it's safe. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Resilience isn't born in moments of power. It's found in the quiet decision to stand up when everything has collapsed around you. I once gave everything to someone who never saw me. Now I give everything to myself, and it's more than enough." I closed the book, placed it on the windowsill, and turned off the light. Not the end, just the beginning.